But okay, here we go. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you and on another device. So I don't think we're going to have the crackling sound now. I certainly hope and pray. We got a lot to talk about as we look at Washington, D.C. and this federal takeover of Washington, D.C. We see that the Washington Post, um, it was published today that this is not something that is new. Indeed, this is something that has been in the hopper for a minute. Talk about that, everybody. What does that mean? That in order to quell civil unrest, the plan is it was a Pentagon document that was leaked and that was published. Did you see it today? Did you hear about it? Terry O'Neill and Lenny Brody and Dr. David Gibbs and Mark Fancher. That in order to quell civil unrest, they plan to have the National Guard. And Daryl Jones and others who live in Washington who've been saying or in the Washington area, so it's not just the National Guard, but it's ICE. It is the FBI. It's the police. What kind of country are we in? Well, you know, we have had a J. Edgar Hoover. Let's not act as if this is just so new to the American experience. The question is, who are we going to be going forward? Oh, yeah, I said it because we've been dealing with this before. Don't act like I don't want to hear anyone else tell me ever again. This is not who we are. This is exactly who we are. It's just not who we ought to be. So now you tell me, how are we going to deal with the homeless? You got to remove them and put them where? So many of the homeless are veterans. What does this mean? What are you talking about? Why are we criminalizing the poor? Are we now going to put them in alligator Alcatraz? I'll put them in jails or detention camps so they can work, not for free, but for little or no money. What are we going to do? And what's going on with the people in the detention centers in these concentration camps anyway? There are no cameras. Whenever congresspersons try to get over there from either house, they're blocked. Now, one person in New Jersey, a congresswoman, is under indictment because she went to find out what was happening in her district. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Under federal indictment. Think about that, everybody. And think about Washington being a center for protest. All of us have been to Washington for a great march because that's what you do in Washington. Well, at least that's what you used to. Because I don't know how you're going to march in between ICE, the FBI, the National Guard, and the police. I don't know how that's supposed to work. When the president says that if someone basically makes a false move, if they're hostile towards you, you have the right to do whatever it is that you need to do to get them straight. Help me, everybody. We, of course, have the past national president and civil rights lawyer of the National Organization of Women, my sister beloved, Terry O'Neill, Attorney Mark Fancher, sending you so much love today, brilliant civil libertarian and author. And we have got Lenny Brody from the Poor People's Campaign of Illinois, but he's a great organizer, everybody, a great organizer. And so I want to talk with him about that. And then we're going to start things off with Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona. And I need to find out from you just what do you make of all of this? Because you are an historian. Is this unprecedented? I mean, because we've gone from the Texas Democrats, really, they have said, they've corrected us. Do not say that we run away. We're running toward a more perfect union. Because what they're doing in Texas is dangerous. A mid-decade redistricting. But then the president turned around and said he wanted to do that 3 days later. And then he said he wants to remove all of the homeless from Washington, D.C. He said, you can be wherever you want, but you're not going to be here. Wow. I mean, it just keeps on going. And now we've got the federal takeover of Washington, D.C., even though homicides are down by more than 35%. Last year's numbers, 32%. Armed robberies down 39%. Armed carjackings down 53%. And he said he was inspired to take over Washington because a young man by the I guess his nickname is Big Balls. He is an ex-Doge employee. You can't make this up. I didn't make it up. That's what he said. 19 years old. He was carjacked by 10 people. Now, I don't know about you, Marv, but I'm paranoid enough to say 10 people carjacked you. What is that? You're an ex-Doge employee? I wonder if these people knew who he was. I mean, because this is Washington, and this is the world after all. I don't know. But Dr. David Gibbs, what do you make of this federal takeover? Um, of Washington, D.C., with the National Guard and the FBI, and the police have been federalized, and apparently ICE is there as well. What do you make of it?
This isn't completely unprecedented. I mean, there have been periodic deployments of National Guard and even federal Army forces. Of course, in '57 in Arkansas, you had the deployment of the 101st Airborne Division during the, in an authoritarian move in New Jersey, I believe, and in Michigan. The National Guard of those states in 1968 were deployed in those cities. This has happened before. The bonus march in 1932 of the veterans in Washington, D.C., you had federal forces deployed. This has happened. It has been rare, though. And Trump is doing something that is very rare without any legitimate, obvious justification. I mean, it'd be one thing if you had this sudden massive spike in crime and people were being murdered right and left. And he's basically making it up, is what he's doing. And so there's no, as far as I can tell, no legitimate reason that even comes close to justifying something like this. And so we are getting here is a rising tide of authoritarianism. It's an obvious point. Many people have made it, so it's hardly a new point. But I think a larger issue, though, is what do we do about it, and what do the Democrats or the activist left do about it? And one problem here is that Trump is not that unpopular. I looked at the Real Clear Politics aggregating of polls, and today Trump's popularity is just under 46%. It's not great, but it's not terrible. Approximately half the population supports him, half opposes him. That's where he's pretty much been at most of the time for the last 10 years. A few dips, like after January 6th, he dipped very low. During the COVID pandemic, but most of the time, it's been about a 50-50 nation. We've been evenly divided. And so in that situation, I hear some of my friends, I've been getting messages today about the need for hundreds of thousands of people to pour into Washington to mass demonstrations, to force Trump out of office. The problem with that is that half the public supports him.
Yeah.
To make a case that he's a bad president, a bad human being, and a case has not been sufficiently made yet, because evidently a lot of people are not convinced. And until you do that, the idea of sort of showing muscle in the streets is unlikely to have an effect, a positive effect. I mean, Trump tried that January 6th, and that was his lowest point ever. So one of the things I wish as a general point, trying to show force or we need to do something can make things worse. We can make things worse. We can increase Trump's popularity. That's happened before. I'm convinced, and I was convinced at the time, the 2 impeachments against Trump increased his popularity. It didn't do anything to hurt him. But the 4 indictments, at least one of which I think was legitimate, the one in Georgia, I think was a very serious charge. They did nothing but increase his popularity. Trump probably would not be president today had he not had those indictments, which were handled very clumsily. And at least the one of which he was convicted, the one for having sex with porn star's name, Stormy Daniels, was so ridiculous that it just increased his popularity. And I just wish the Democrats and my friends in the activist left would realize you can make things worse by doing a clumsy effort to attack Trump. Sometimes the best thing to do is sit back and think about it before you act. So I'm not sure there's an obvious thing we can do at this time. What the Democrats need to do is make a case to the public, a convincing case that so far they have not made, that Trump's a bad president. Now, you'd think that wouldn't be difficult, because Trump, in essence, is a clown and a joke. That's what he's always been. That's what he is today. It's a remarkable testimony to the weakness of the Democrats and the weakness of the opposition, that they haven't been able, to put him down for good. And think about this. For 10 years, Trump has dominated politics in this country. People have underestimated him, or I think more accurately, overestimated the opposition to him. The opposition to him is at least feeble. It seems incompetent. And so I think that we have to recognize how poorly we have behaved collectively in opposing Trump. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Trump is still standing and still reasonably popular. And so we need to decide before we act, and just acting because we need to do something is not a solution. First thing we need to do is not make things worse. So I hope people keep their heads about them. Let me put it that way.
Why is he still so popular? I mean, and is what is happening in Washington, does that give people any cause to pause, or are people just shrugging it off?
I think the reason is there are basic problems that are unaddressed. I mean, I think that two key things is the war on terror was a catastrophe, and there was no accountability, no heads rolled, nobody was fired. The people who promoted the war were promoted, and major figures were promoted in both parties. Victoria Nuland, she went from advisor to Richard Cheney, advocating a war in Ukraine and Iraq with catastrophic circumstances, to being elevated into the Obama State Department and then the Biden State Department. She went up for failure. That was very damaging to the credibility of both parties. There was the 2008 financial blowout, which devastated people's living standards. No accountability, no heads rolled, no prosecutions, no nothing. We look forward, not backward. Well, that worked out really well, didn't it? We have the long-standing problem of wealth concentration of this country. It's been going on since the 70s, unabated. We have basic infrastructure that's terrible. Again, I mentioned this before, but you fly from American airports to foreign airports, you realize our airports are in terrible shape. Our train stations are in terrible shape. Subways, roads in Tucson, the roads look like they'd be appropriate to a much poorer country. Healthcare is the worst of any rich country in the world. Life expectancy, everything is not what it should be in this country. And I think all of those things have led to a dissatisfaction with both countries. Trump is an anti-system politician. He was despised by the political mainstream, and that's why he was elected. Of course, he's made things even worse. But nevertheless, he has this style which seems to be so hostile to the political establishment. The political establishment, or at least much of it, is so hostile to him that I think that he's a classic demagogue, and he plays upon people's fears, in this case, legitimate fears and grievances. I think what we had is a need for an anti-system candidate. Personally, I'm a big fan of Bernie Sanders. I think had he been elected in 2016, things could have gone very differently. We were in the mood for a realignment. And, you have politicians who were interested in realignment, like Sanders, who appealed to the better angels of people's nature, and ones like Trump, who appealed to their darker instincts. So if you block Bernie Sanders, it's not surprising you get a Trump. I mean, that's the price we paid. That's the price the Democrats paid for blocking Bernie Sanders, in my view. The country needed a change, and so Trump was the change. Well, congratulations. That worked out very well. So I think there's a lot of blame to go around here, is my point. Putting all the blame on Trump excuses the Democrats, and frankly, to some extent, excuses the activist left, who haven't been very effective. We're going through a political realignment in this country. And in the world, I should add. American hegemony is collapsing right before our eyes. And it's not necessarily going to be a very pretty process. It's going to be a very dangerous process. And we're seeing some of those dangers right now on the streets of Washington. I don't have a good answer to what the solution is, except that before we do anything, let's not make it worse, because we could easily do that.
Lenny Brody, what do you make of what's happening in Washington? And particularly given that the Washington Post obtained this leaked document from the Pentagon saying that, hey, we plan to do more of this. This will be the playbook for the rest of the United States. And as Dr. Gibbs pointed out, this is a president who half the country approves of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So help me.
Well, I think first of all, we have to understand what we're fighting against before we can figure out what to do. And I think one of the problems is people blame Trump as an individual. And I think we have to understand that individuals can't do much on their own. Trump is part of a whole apparatus that wants to change the country.
No, stop. I need you to say that one more time, because people keep making it about him. What did you say? He's what?
He's part of an entire apparatus, a section of the people who run this country who want to transform this country. And it's not just bad policies, it's not just Trump as an individual, but it's a plan by this grouping to transform the country into, you can call it authoritarian, fascist, whatever you want to say. And so, in order to fight what's going on, first of all, you have to understand that it's not Trump the individual, that there really is a whole powerful section. J.D. Vance has a system of think tanks and a system of fundraising foundations that are financing a big part of this. Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson are organizing masses of people behind this. So there's a whole apparatus going on. And so I think that's the first thing you have to understand. The second thing is that the Democratic Party is responsible for Trump. They went around trying to elect people saying that the economy is fine. Well, the economy isn't fine. It's a lot worse than people are letting on. And so people listen to Trump. And the Democratic Party has no real alternative. That's why half the country supports Trump, because they know there are economic problems. They know there's corruption and political problems, and they're looking for an answer. Now, Trump is not the real answer, but the Democrats certainly are. And so unless we develop a vehicle to fight this situation, we're powerless. You can call demonstrations and you can write articles and things, but the question is how you're actually going to fight. And I think the American people have said for many years they want a new political party. That people realize that Democrats and Republicans have no solutions and that they want a political party. And the Democrats are constantly, blocking that. But now it's becoming clearer and clearer. A lot of progressives within the Democratic Party, a lot of us organizers outside the Democratic Party are seeing the need for some way to fight, organized way to fight. And so I think that's being discussed about the need for a new political party. You see Mamdani getting elected in New York. You see Jeremy Corbyn in England announcing a new party. There's a lot of things going on that are supporting this need for a new party. And I think that that's the direction that we're going. And we're not going to be able to block what Trump is doing unless we have an organized understanding of what's happening and how can we really oppose it. And the other thing, the last thing I'll say is we can't fight each of the individual things that Trump is pulling. Steve Bannon has this saying, we're flooding the zone. I mean, there's all kinds of attacks going on. And if you go from one thing to the next thing, you get lost in the morass. We really have to have a systematic approach to fighting what's going on. It's very, very serious. Even though things like this in isolation have happened before in history, this is a situation. They're trying to set up a different form of government. It's a form of government that's existed for a long time in the South. If you want to see what he's doing, before, look at how things have gone on in the South, where people have pulled off the streets and things like that. So I think we have to have these kind of discussions, but they're already taking place. I mean, a lot of people in Chicago, we're electing these independent people. They're in the Democratic Party, but they know that they're independent of the Democratic Party. And there's discussions about forming a new party. The Democratic Socialists of America held their conference in Chicago last weekend, and they had several resolutions about forming a new party. There were 1,200 delegates from that organization. 38 of those delegates were from Chicago. So there is a lot of stuff going on, but it needs to be focused with that understanding of what we're up against and an understanding of how we can fight it.
Well, that ought to be music to your ears, Terry O'Neill. I didn't mean to make you choke. Gee, but you have been sounding, you've been ringing that bell for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, please, honestly, I have been too, because I think just given what we saw when Reverend ran for president, and then what I saw, who was acceptable, who was not. We already knew that, but
Mhm.
see it again. And then I saw it, you skip over Obama because he was acceptable. And then you go to Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders came out of our campaign. I get it. But these are the people who excite the base.
Right. Right.
Republicans got it. Whatever you think about Trump, he excited them. They did not like him. I know a lot of Republicans, plenty. They did not like him. They didn't. But they said, you know what? Okay, we're going to ride this horse. That's it. And as Dr. Gibbs just pointed out, he's like just under 50% in terms of his popularity, even as he is unleashing a martial law in the United States.
Mhm.
I don't know any other way to put it. I don't know how you have a march in Washington, which is what you do when you go to D.C. You go to march, you go to monuments, and you march. I don't know. I don't know how you're supposed to have a march when you've got the FBI, ICE, the National Guard, and the police surrounding you. I don't know how it's supposed to work.
Right. Right. Tell me about it. Santita, I think one thing, I think the main reason Donald Trump is popular is because we are in the second Gilded Age. It's the same reason that FDR was popular. Vastly different policy prescriptions for this country to get us to fix the problems brought about by extreme wealth and income inequality. Back when FDR was running for president in the 1930s, he himself used the word dictator. And a lot of his supporters in the Democratic Party and also Herbert Hoover's supporters in the Republican Party were calling for a dictator. That was the feeling. This was right at the height of the Great Depression, the beginning of the Great Depression. And people felt like they needed someone very strong who would take the helm. In times of economic crisis, which is brought about by a Gilded Age, people do want to turn to a dictator. And Trump came along and said, I'm a dictator. And the Democrats' answer to that was, no, we have some policies, we have some fixes, we have, I used to think of it as, that they're very different from the Republicans. The Republicans, as a person who's worked in the women's movement for most of my career, the Republicans present a big fist punching me in the face. And the Democrats represent a bag of frozen peas. Make it a little bit better, right? But they're not offering me, a clear path to liberation and well-being that I need, right? And people go with a dictator in this kind of economic turmoil kinds of times. So I think that's why Trump is very popular. I think the other piece is that he is very popular because the Democrats are so unpopular, because they are failing so magnificently. By the way, the impeachment proceedings, the criminal the criminal charges against Trump, they would have been far more popular if they had been backed by someone with a clear moral vision of where we need to go. Someone that says, no, it is not acceptable that some people in this country get health care for all of the things that could go wrong for them, but half the population gets health care withheld for many things that go wrong. Half the population faces criminal charges if they have a miscarriage. And let me say, 1/3 of pregnancies end in miscarriage in this country. So you're criminalizing a lot of people that way. If we had a clear moral vision for voting rights, for ending the targeting of communities of color, with taking their voting rights away, undergirding these criminal charges against Trump, if there had been, some kind of clear value statement, like what Reverend did in the 80s, Santita, right? The war on his war on poverty, his claims about, he pulled together the misogyny, the racism, and the capitalism and the failures of capitalism into his campaigns in the 80s. That's a clear moral vision, with a bright North Star of where we need to go. The Democrats aren't providing that right now. And I think that actually makes Trump, the dictator, more popular because people want something strong right now. So I think that's part of it. So what is he doing with his popularity? He's doing Project 2025, which is privatize everything. Privatize making of the roads and the police and the prisons and the fire departments and healthcare, and privatize all of it and make it so that the whole purpose of all of these things is to put money in the pockets of billionaires. Deregulate, that puts more money in the pockets of billionaires. Want poor people to pay more in taxes. They just did that. They succeeded in doing that with the big BS bill that was just passed. They also want to bring back, and I think Lenny Brody is absolutely right. They want to bring back the 18th century, 19th century version of governance in this country, which is grounded in vicious racism and misogyny, both, right? And that is what you want to see. What the vision for Project 2025 is. Look no further than Mississippi in 1825.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're at.
Well, I mean, Mark Fancher, you've got a president who's really got a nearly 50% approval rating, and yet, interestingly enough, our capital, the capital of the United States, has been overtaken by the federal government. And I mean, and the corporate media have not called him out on the outright lies, Lenny Brody and Terry O'Neill. I mean, crime last year went down, markedly so. 32% reduction in homicides, 39% reduction in armed robberies, 53% reduction in armed carjackings. And there was more of a decline this year so far. And yet, you just hear these talking points reiterated as if they're true, and they're not. And here we are. I mean, it doesn't concern you that we've got the FBI, ICE, and the National Guard and the police on the streets of DC, or does this kind of feel like a black neighborhood? I just have to say it.
Yeah, I think the entire phenomenon is one that when you get right down to it, it's all about white people. Because what has happened in this country is because of corporate greed and offshoring, military adventures overseas, and imperialism, there has been a major destabilization of the not just the national economy, but just the individual circumstances of working people in this country. And because of it, they do not enjoy, either in fact or in their perception, the status that white people should enjoy, particularly white men. That the 1950s image of the white family is that you've got dad who goes off to work, makes a good living, comes home, sits in his recliner with his pipe and his newspaper while petting the dog, and mom is in the kitchen preparing a meal for the two well-scrubbed kids. And that's America. That's American greatness. That's what it's supposed to be like. But all of that has changed. People are struggling financially. They have all of these other people who don't fit the Leave It to Beaver kind of a reality that they have in their heads. You've got these LGBTQ people, you've got all of these brown people coming across the border, raping and killing people, or at least so they say. You have black people who are in all kinds of places where they shouldn't be, including the White House. You've got just a transformation of a country that begins to look very different and very frightening to the average white worker. And when you have somebody like Donald Trump who comes along, and he may be a vile person, he may be misogynistic, he may go against everything that you cherish most about your religious faith. He may be disgusting in so many ways, but by George, he's standing up for the white people. And it doesn't matter what he does or what he says. It doesn't matter how ludicrous his policies are. It doesn't matter how much he does that makes absolutely no logical sense whatsoever. He's standing up for white people. And how do we know that? Well, he does. He goes into the Pentagon and he rips out all references to Black history. He threatens to go and close down the African American Museum. One of the first things that he does is rip up Black Lives Matter Plaza. And it goes on and on and on. All of these direct attacks on communities of color. He sends ICE into the Home Depot parking lots and starts rounding up all of these pesky brown people. All of the things that just make white people feel a lot more secure because he's going after all of these threatening populations is something that helps them to continue to give their unwavering support to this man, notwithstanding all that he does. And I think that the mistake that the rest of us make is believing that that type of phenomenon can be countered within the political system and within political culture. By making the Democratic Party stronger, by running people who are going to do this, by demonstrating in the streets and showing just how vigorous and strong our movement is, by doing all of that, you can't fight that type of racism in that way. That kind of thing is a matter of what's in the heart and what's in the soul. And you just don't get at it like that. The only thing that you do is you make those flames of hatred flame even brighter and stronger because you become more visible as a threat to the notion that they have of what America is supposed to be. And even if you could appeal on that level, I think we have to keep in mind that the political system and the process is one that real people don't control, that it is dominated by corporate interests and an oligarchy that's rigged it so that no matter what we do, we're not going to in any way succeed in changing the reality of this country. And it's folly. And I recall that, when I was in law school, Ronald Reagan was in his first term, I believe. And I remember thinking that, it seems like, I was in school in New Jersey, and I remember thinking, it seems like every weekend I'm on some chartered bus going down to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate. And after a while, it occurred to me that I'm spending an awful lot of time demonstrating when I could be using this time to build something, to create an affirmative agenda that is going to change the reality of the community that I live in, that's going to reinforce the opportunities for kids who are disadvantaged to have an opportunity to even reinforce my own abilities to become a better advocate and things like that. I'm spending this time on this bus, chasing all of these issues that just seem to be thrown up every week by this president. And I think, and I pledged to myself back then that I would never make that mistake again. And I think that Donald Trump has given us the opportunity to continue to make that mistake. That we just continue to chase after all of these red herrings, these ridiculous kinds of plots and plans and policies that he throws up, and we're wasting time and we're wasting energy. Even the idea of trying to organize, political parties and things like that, it's a waste when what we really need to do is to begin to think creatively about building something that's an alternative reality. And it's an old lesson that was taught to us by Jesus and his disciples. If you look in the book of Acts, you can see how they dealt with the establishment back then, most particularly the Roman Empire and even the religious establishment, when they basically said, we have no future in any of that. Nobody from our community is going to be able to participate in the Roman political system and make any kinds of changes that are going to change that's going to make Rome take its imperialistic heel off of our necks. The religious establishment is one that is not going to listen to us because we represent something radically different from anything that they stand for. And so therefore we will just disengage, lock, stock, and barrel. We will build our own nation, which is what they did because they had thousands and thousands of people who were part of this, who established what I regard as the first socialist society, because they were contributing everything they had to a common pot, distributing it to people as they had need. They had a committee of people who were responsible for ensuring fairness and justice in the distribution of material goods, and which were functioning essentially as a government. We can do that. We really can. But as long as we're just chasing Donald Trump's absurdities, we'll never get it together long enough, or in a way that is meaningful, that will allow us to make any sort of progress on that front.
Well, to your point, Mark, that's why I've mentioned over and over and over again Lenny Brody and Attorney Terry O'Neill, Peter Thiel. And I mean, these tech bros, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel created, what is it, PayPal? This is a tech, no, wait a second, a technocracy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we got. And I was reading an article that said you don't need an Epstein anymore. Because now these companies are all over you. They know your digital footprint. They know enough about you that they can simulate you in AI. And when I'm reading the paper and I see that there's a plan to quell some civil unrest, which surely could come when you look at the $1 trillion cuts to healthcare, Lenny, when you look at Social Security that's going to be cut. These cuts we're not going to feel until after November 2026. That's how they structured it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that they are ready for people to protest and they're ready to shut everybody down.
Yeah.
I hear no hue and cry, Lenny.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to examine the economy. And, Reverend Barber, one of the chairs of the Poor People's Campaign, his latest book is called White Poverty, and it's now out in paperback, so you don't have to spend more money. But I think one of the things, it's really, like you're saying, it's really important to examine the position and the thinking of white people in the United States. And, Trump can fool these people for so long, but if you're hungry and your kids are starving, you begin looking for other alternatives. And the reason I know this is I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn. And, in the 50s, they had projects for black people and projects for white people, but the white poverty was always hidden. And the white people were made to feel inadequate. How come all these white people are wealthy and I'm not? But I'm telling you, the poor whites who support Trump, I can talk to. I really can talk to because they want food. They want health care. And I think the role of the Poor People's Campaign of uniting the people at the bottom who really need change. See, it's going to be very difficult to survive in this country, no matter what you do. Between the political repression and the economic crisis that's coming, people are going to be suffering pretty bad. And I think that's why Trump is militarizing the country, because they know that this can't last forever. People, are starving to death, and the question is Gaza going to happen in the United States?
Hmm.
You know, that's the question. And I think, out of the whole Gaza situation, there will become a revolutionary upsurge, because there was nothing before, and they see what they're facing. And I think in the United States, it's going to be similar. When you're starving to death, and your kids are dying, you have to organize to fight to change the country. You can't hide. And that's what I learned. I mean, I was in the projects, and I thought it was my fault, that I was in the projects. But the more and more people we're organizing in downstate Illinois. In downstate Illinois, if you say you're a Democrat, that nobody will talk to you. But there are these poor towns in southern Illinois where there's a black town in poverty, and there's a white town in poverty. And the Poor People's Campaign is organizing to bring those groupings together. We've got to get a majority in this country to change the country. And the heart of the majority has to be poor people. The professionals and the politicians can't lead us. And I agree, we don't need another party that's a little bit of the left of the Democratic Party. We need a party of poor people to fight for us. And that's my outlook. And I think that's the only hope the country has, because if we don't do something, we're all going to go down.
Are you hearing people react to what's happening in Washington?
Mm-hmm.
Lynn,
Yeah.
what are you hearing? And who are you hearing it from?
First of all, there've been 2 bomb attacks from on the people from Texas, the Democrats who are staying in the hotel in Texas.
Yeah.
People are talking about this isn't, normal times, and I think people also understand that Trump may have the legality to go in and federalize the National Guard in D.C., but he didn't have the legality in L.A., right? And he did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are beginning to realize that you can't rely on the courts. They'll drag it out in the court for years. In the meantime, he did what he wanted to in L.A., and he's scaring the shit out of everybody. We need not only a new political party that runs candidates, but a political party that fights and organizes demonstrations. What we're doing here in Chicago in the neighborhoods with the independent political organizations, we support candidates, we run candidates, but in between the elections, we're organizing in the neighborhoods around the issues and helping people. And I agree with what you were saying. We also have to survive in this condition. Huey Newton, the Panthers, said, projects of survival pending revolution. And so we're organized. We've got 250 people in a rapid response team on the northwest side of Chicago. Whenever ICE shows up, we organize people to show up. We have, mutual aid stuff. During the pandemic, we were feeding people, and we were checking up on people. So we're organizing survival. But we have to have a vision to transform this country. That's my outlook.
No, but Mark, maybe that's the blessing of this moment. Because it is forcing people to survive and thrive together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I've always regarded all of this turmoil as something that ultimately is positive. I mean, out of great pain comes great progress. And so, yes, I think we have to keep it in perspective. But at the same time, I think we have to be brutally honest about the circumstances that we face. And I think that there are some challenges that we have that I just honestly don't have responses to. And foremost among them is just the very complicated racial circumstances of this country. I do think that we are, and I think Lenny Brody is absolutely correct. I think that that the militarization of the country is in anticipation of a great upheaval by desperate white workers primarily.
Mhm.
And they're not afraid to throw down. I mean, they're heavily armed, and they've been training for all kinds of things, survival and race war and all kinds of things. They know how to fight, and they're just ready. And if ever they take a mind to do that, then they will. So the prospects of a massive uprising in this country that could even result in the overthrow of the existing order is not far-fetched. But I think that what we have to come to terms with is the fact that it brings with it lots of very difficult baggage. What happens if, after the overthrow, uh, white chauvinism still rears its ugly head as we're talking about the new reality that we're trying to build? And particularly if communities of color, and I don't think that they'll let it happen, but if somehow they're used as cannon fodder, in the course of this struggle, and at the end of it, there are people picking through the ruins and the bodies and saying, okay, now let's build something new. We're putting the white people in charge, and so we've got a really difficult challenge there. And I think that we can't even begin to confront that kind of thing until, even in this moment, we're not prepared to confront the reality of what the country is. And the country is, no way, in any way you slice it, it is an illegal settler colony.
Mhm.
It is established on stolen territory, on the bodies of people who are the victims of genocide, and which was built up on that foundation with enslaved labor. Uh, And if there's not an honesty and a willingness to look at that and to say, how do we undo it? How do we make it right
Mhm.
as we're trying to construct something new? Then whatever it is that you build is going to suffer from the same kinds of flaws that the current system that we have, the current society and government that we have, the same things. It will suffer from those same things.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. We saw that in the Poor People's Campaign. Reverend Barber was one co-chair, and Reverend Liz Theo Harris, a white woman, was the other co-chair. And the attacks on both of them to split them were
Mhm.
unbelievable.
Mhm.
And the same thing also happened in Chicago. We have a black mayor, Brandon Johnson, and we had a Latino floor leader, Carlos Rosa. And they were working together. And sure enough, the people who run the country split them and it basically forced Brandon to fire Carlos. I mean,
Mm.
and he had no choice because of the enemy is so powerful, and that racism is so powerful, and I mean, it's just it's a reality that has to be recognized every minute of the day for sure.
Well, and he'd also, the support that he's not getting from Black people did not give him the support
Mm,
to be able to hold on.
right.
And because they have Black and brown people at odds with each other.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
quite frankly, some uncomfortable truths have not been discussed.
Hmm.
I mean, because everybody comes to the United States with anti-Black racism. That's a
Hmm.
very real thing. And until that's discussed in the Latino community, because I have a lot of friends who are in the Hispanic culture, and because it's a culture. It's a culture. Many of them, over here, they're indigenous people who speak Spanish. And many of them are heavily mixed with the European Spaniard, and they relate to that, and that becomes a problem, right? And until that issue is dealt with, or should I say, while we need to come together, that issue needs to be dealt with because because the only way we're going to win is if we come together.
Hmm.
And that's with poor white people. Everybody's going to have to figure it out, but we have got to deal with the anti-Black racism in this country because it is. Du Bois said it. The problem of the color line is real. That's the schism in the United States. It is, and it keeps us from moving ahead. I've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, but I want to get closing thoughts from each of you. So just help me to understand where we're going with this, because now, I mean, because, oh, let me not forget, homelessness. I don't, yeah, but I'm going to reach back out to all of you so we can talk about the criminalization of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where will they put these people? He says he wants to remove them and settle them where? What are you planning to do? Terry O'Neill, your closing thought.
You know, I think identifying racism as the ongoing problem, that we will not get the kind of progress we want unless we really address it. I think that's exactly spot on. Organizing white people and I don't think it takes a lot to get white people to agree with you that capitalism is killing us. It didn't take a lot back in the 30s, right? But FDR was so successful with Social Security and the regulation of Wall Street and the provision of electricity to these rural communities. Why? Because it was only for white people. You can get white people will get right behind socialist policies, but as soon as you say, oh, but you have to share it with non-white people, that's a problem. That is a huge problem for white people. That is part of the reason why white women, a majority of white women since 1980, have consistently voted for the anti-woman candidate for president, for the candidate that supports policies that kill women. Because we know that every restriction on abortion, every legal restriction on abortion, results inevitably in increased rates of preventable death from complications of pregnancy and childbirth, because it pushes OBGYNs out of medical practice, and it shuts down clinics. So you have these politicians that literally promote policies that kill women, and white women go for those politicians because of race. And you know, if the women's movement can't get its act in order to turn that around, and the socialists need to, I'm a proud member of the Democratic Socialists of America. We need to get our act in gear and really, as we are reaching out to, I live in Tennessee, rural people in Tennessee, very open to a socialist message, but it needs to be an anti-racism socialist message. That's harder, but we will fail if we don't do it that way.
Well, you know, that is something that you were pushing, you know, when you were president of the National Organization of Women. You said, we have got to deal with that. That was something that I really appreciated. And well, I mean, among all the other issues, because all these isms are choking us to death. Mark Fancher, your closing thought?
I think that what we really need to do is we need to reimagine who our community is. Right now, we're locked into thinking of our community as people within the borders of the United States of America. We need to internationalize our struggle, because we have people around the world who are suffering and struggling because of the same forces that cause pain for people here in the United States. And I think if we start building active working relationships with people around the world who are oppressed, particularly in the global South, then that does a couple of things. One, it does help us to fight on all fronts where the enemy is operating, you know, matching them blow for blow, you know, and fighting back everywhere that we can. Two, it increases, if not overwhelms, in terms of the racial balance, who is part of our community. You know, people of all colors all over the place, so that white chauvinism doesn't have a place to resonate so much. That there is finally a recognition that we're all in this together, and that we come in all colors. We come from all places. We speak lots of languages, and we all have the same enemy, and we're all united against that enemy. And I think if we begin to work in that way, then it begins to address many of the problems that we have.
Well, you know, my hope is that one day we will listen to people who've been telling us that for the longest time.
Like Malcolm.
Because Dr. King, that's the Southern Christian Leadership Conference is
Mhm.
the credo was to save the soul of America.
Mm-hmm.
Not black and white together. It was to save the soul of America because this is a spiritual issue. The rainbow, the Panther rainbow was borrowed from the Poor People's Campaign,
Mhm.
which was Dr. King's thing, and Reverend went on to become the mayor of Resurrection City because after Dr. King was killed, devastated as they were, they had to keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and now, and the baton, people, the baton isn't passed. You got to pick it up because nobody wants to carry this weight, Lenny Brody, but carry it we must.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to say a few things about homelessness. I think that is a very important thing because with the technological developments and AI, people are not employable anymore.
Yeah.
Lots of people are being laid off, and this vision of the homeless who are mentally ill or addicted is really a phony vision because many of these people are losing their jobs because of the economy. And I was working at Home Depot, and the people working at Home Depot had all this education. I was working with architects and lawyers and all kinds of people because there are no more jobs. And I think the point of attack on homelessness is in anticipation that that's what's going to happen. People are losing their jobs, they're losing the ability to support their family, and they're becoming homeless and are trying to organize, to survive. And I think the powers that be realize that this is going to be the necessary point of attack. So I think that really is a very important thing you mentioned.
Well, I think I can't wait to have you all back because these are issues with which we must grapple as we watch the social safety net shredded. You're going to see more and more of this pain, which is why they're preparing for social and civil unrest. Um, and it's going to be tough to live through, but it's necessary because, quite frankly, we've gone too far.
Mhm.
We've gone too far. You can't have people who are on track to become trillionaires publicly because you already have families that are trillionaires. You just dare not mention their names.
Mhm.
And you've got all of this poverty. My pastor, Reverend Clay Evans, said, I've never seen God make a mouth that God could not feed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to run to the next hour. Donald Whitehead, the director of the National Coalition on Homelessness, is with us. If you'd like me to send you a link, I will do that.
Mhm.
And if you'd like,
Mhm.
if you like, because I know.
I have to run. I've got another meeting I'm already late for.
I
I'm
know
so
my
sorry.
brother Mark Fancher has to run. Would you like to join us, Lenny?
No, I've got things to do, but if
I'll
I'm
get you
going to
another
look for
day.
that
But
program.
hey, everybody, join us. We're going to talk about it here on the Santita Jackson Show.
Right.
Back in just a moment. AM
Thank
950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.
you.
Thank you, Santita.
Much love, everybody.